So many people that I know and care about are suffering with anxiety or with depression right now. And as an investor and a business person and a dad and someone that still wants to have good relationships with my mates and someone who likes to train and loves to spend time with my kids, and connect with people and help people, anxiety has been something that I've been personally living with for the last couple of years. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that have helped me live with or learn to live with and overcome my anxiety personally. Obviously, anxiety or depression can come in waves. And so, as my psychologist said to me, Ben, sometimes it's right there in your face and sometimes it's a little bit more manageable over here. But the reality is, it's like anything else in your life that you sort of take care of and you look after. And so, for me, I wanted to share a little bit about my story. I know this is a bit different to the property stuff I'm normally talking about, but I just think with 1 out of every 3 people in Australia living with some sort of mental health issue, whether that's anxiety or stress or chronic fatigue or pressure or that's depression for other people, I just wanted to share and document my experience, because a lot of the time, when I speak to people, especially those that have been following the channel for a while or following our podcast, the Pumped on Property Show, or those of you that have subscribed to the channel so that you can get this content regularly, a lot of the time it can feel like when you look at someone else's life that everything's rosy and that if you were just in their position, everything would be okay. But unfortunately, it was actually when I'd achieved everything that I wanted to achieve in my life that the anxiety got the worst for me. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about, how I discovered that I had anxiety, because I think I'd been living with it for a lot longer than I even probably want to acknowledge. I 100% know I'd been living with it from the moment I started this business, Pumped on Property. I also think back and I remember feeling very, very anxious about the future and the fact that I wasn't getting to where I wanted to be fast enough when I was working for someone else. I know I spent a lot of time living in the future and thinking about the future when I was working my way towards financial freedom. And, I think the cost of constantly living in the future is that you sometimes can ignore the present moment, and the present moment is the one that you can actually change and influence for the better. So, the moment that really triggered my anxiety, or there was a number of moments, but I went on a trip to America with some friends and my brother about 3 years ago now, and it sort of turned into more of a party trip than we were expecting, and we just sort of, got on the beers for probably 5 or 6 days, and I came back from that trip and I didn't feel 100% myself. I think for some reason, drinking that much just sort of had an effect on my brain, and the fact that I also had, a family at that stage, the fact that I also had businesses at that stage, I think it was just the compounding effect of that pressure over time, and that was kind of what got the pot simmering, if you know what I mean, or boiling. And so I remember, fast forward a little bit after that trip, my wife and I bought a little caravan, and the caravan was so helpful in terms of just beginning to get away and getting into different situations or environments that enabled me to sort of start understanding and working through some stuff. But we took the caravan for our first trip because we had no idea what we were doing with it, to a mate's house. They own a farm in Western Brisbane, and I was sitting around the fire with everyone, and I was literally just there and I was talking, and I just felt this massive amount of pressure in my chest, like it literally felt like I was having a heart attack. Now I realize it was just, anxiety or probably having a bit of a panic attack type thing. And it was just after I'd paid off my own home, and I thought, paying off my own home or achieving this goal or doing that goal would make me happier. But in fact, I'd achieved so many things that I'd set out to do, and I was no happier. In fact, in a lot of ways, I was actually unhappier. And so the combination of too many beers on that trip and the business and having a young family and the pressures associated with being an investor and working towards financial freedom, I think just got to that point. And at this at this overnight camping trip that I was having with my family, I was sitting around the fire and I'm like, I was talking to some good friends of ours and my wife, I'm like, I honestly have no idea what to do. Like, I'm just constantly feeling like this. I was waking up multiple times during the night in my head thinking, I was freaking out about things. I was constantly feeling pressure in my chest. I was breathing really shallow. I wasn't eating properly. I wasn't sleeping properly. I wasn't exercising properly. I wasn't fully present with my family, and I'll talk more about what anxiety is and what it did for me as well in a moment. But one of my wife's best friends, Mia, who I've done a video on before, because Mia's kicking ass as well. She's got like a couple of businesses and she's bought lots of properties, and she paid off her own home by the time she was 21. And she's also gone through a lot of stuff as well, mental health wise. And she said to me, why don't you just start by taking one day off a week? And I was like, I can't do that. The business needs me, and all of my ego and all of my like pain body, as Eckhart Tolle calls it, was just attached to this. Like, I can't stop, because the thought of stopping was actually scarier to me than not stopping, because I was so addicted to the cortisol. I was so addicted to the adrenaline constantly going through my body. I was so addicted to feeling anxious and constantly thinking and constantly being switched on and constantly living in the future, and my mind was just constantly going, that it really was freaky to me. But you know, like, I'm a person that also acknowledges when there's a problem, and I'll do everything I can to address it. And so basically from the next week forward, I just got into work. I changed my calendar, which was the scariest thing I've ever done. And then I took that Friday off. Now, I'm a person that literally before that had about 2 weeks off in 4 years. You know, I was just so motivated financially to achieve financial freedom and to set up the business and to invest in property that, you know, holidays to me, and not taking breaks is probably part of the reason why I got as wound up as I did. But it really was super confronting. Like, you'd sort of think that, yes, like the idea of a 3-day weekend every single week would just be amazing. But because so much of my identity had got tied into, I just work really hard, or I invest, or I run this business, I literally had almost forgotten some of the other things that made me happy. And for about the first 3 months, the Fridays were just so uncomfortable. Like, I was getting panic attacks. I was thinking about the business all day. I was sitting down and just planning the future almost every single week in the exact same way for no reason. Like, I was just so anxious. And when I get anxiety, and when a lot of other people do, you kind of try and control your environment. So you try and control the future by planning for it or over planning for it. And I know this is something that a lot of business people and a lot of investors do. They just constantly planning their future, running through the numbers. But you know, for me, like, it's important to know where you're going, and it's very important to have a plan for the future, but you don't have to keep working that plan if it's the right one, and you certainly don't have to keep thinking about it on a day-to-day basis. You know, you can check in with it once a week or once a month or once a year, and if you're clear about the plan and it's simple, it'll pull you through. So yeah, it started with the taking the Fridays off, and then I did go and get some help, because again, I just had no idea how to handle it. So my dad and my mum have both lived with anxiety pretty much their entire lives, but they've never actually done anything about it in a meaningful way where they've really confronted it. So I went to the GP, and in Australia, one of the awesome things is you can get a referral for a mental health care plan, and I think you can get 10 sessions, up to 10 sessions a year, which are either fully paid for by the government or partially paid for, depending on the psychologist you go and see. And that was the start of my recovery process. So I was taking these Fridays off, but I still wasn't really getting it together. And so I decided that I had to go and see a psychologist. And, you know, I was always fearful of that. Like, I, you know, didn't want to go and spend hundreds of dollars a week talking to someone about the past. Like, that's just not really the sort of person I am. I'm much more of a living in the moment, living in the future type of person. And one of the things that I loved about the psychologist that I went and saw is that there's all sorts of different ways of working through stuff. And so he taught me about this ACT principle, and there's an incredible book in relation to this called The Happiness Trap. I highly recommend it. If you feel stress or pressure in your life or anxiety in your life, this book has absolutely changed mine. I'm still only after reading it for a year now, almost a year. I'm actually a year this week. I'm still only a third of the way in because there's so much in this book. It's not one of those books that you pick up and you read start to finish. It's one of those books where you pick up and every second page there's something that you're supposed to actually practice weekly. Now in this ACT principle, or in this ACT way of thinking, effectively it's about living as much in the present moment as you possibly can. So that means learning this skill called diffusion, where as the thought comes up into your mind, you can acknowledge that thought, or you can accept that thought, or you can make space for that thought, or you can it teaches you other things like grounding or breathing properly, and or it teaches you things like categorizing thoughts. So that's just that thought that I regularly have, that one of the thoughts that I had as a property investor was that the market was going to collapse, and all of the time I was looking for cues in the market and the people that I followed to reinforce that belief that I had that the market was going to collapse. So that was a regular thought that I had, and when that thought would come up, once I learned how to work with my thoughts better and understand them, I just go, that's that thought that I tell myself when I scare myself about the property market. That's that thought that I have that I should be working more than I am today, or that's that thought that I have that, and it talks about, your mind being almost like a blue sky, right? And sometimes clouds come past, and, you wouldn't give importance to the cloud in the sky that's passing, like you wouldn't give importance to a thought that's in your mind. And it sort of has enabled me to create this buffer or this space between myself and my thoughts, or to slow down, or not put as much weight on the chattering in my mind. And so that's where I sort of started. I started with these psychology sessions, which I still go to once every 3 to 4 weeks. For me, mental health is kind of like physical health, right? And I'm so grateful that I approach it this way as well. You're in much better condition if you regularly look after yourself and eat good food, or sleep well, or breathe well, or go to the gym and work out, or hang out with people, or have a purpose in your life. And just like that, it's kind of I believe in going and seeing the psychologist and just having a conversation about the mental afflictions or the suffering that I'm going through in that month. And so instead of my mental health swinging completely off the Richter like this, from super happy to not, or whatever it is for different people, it's kind of just washing the car, or it's kind of more like mowing the lawn, you know what I mean? It's just more maintenance. And so if I do that regularly, what I've found is the swings almost stop. Now, another huge thing this book taught me, or there were two massive things that have really helped me with my anxiety, and one is one of those things is what my true value system is. Now, a lot of people are unhappy, and in the book they call it values twisting. You think about the best days of your life that you've ever lived, or what makes you happy on a daily basis, and it's generally when you're living your life's purpose, or you're living in line with your values, they call it in the book. And for me, it's what do I actually value? I know that I love and value my family and my friends, and this is what the books help me realize and uncover my value system. I know that I love and value contributing and business, and setting myself up for financial freedom and helping other people. So that's sort of wealth and contribution are two major values to me, and I get to do both of those through the business, which is beautiful. And then I also know that I really value looking after my mind, my body, and now my spirit, that I've become a little bit more aware about so many things. And so that's been huge for me. It's been absolutely insane for me. It's been the biggest thing that I've ever realized, because on a daily basis, now that I actually understand what I value and what makes me happy, I just live my values on a day-to-day basis, and I don't do as many of the things that aren't in line with my values anymore. And another thing with a lot of people with anxiety, especially now that I'm a bit more aware of it for myself, and so when I talk to other people and see other people, there's just so many people living with stuff that don't know they're living with stuff. And the book talks about understanding your triggers, or a lot of the work that I've done with my psychologist is about understanding my triggers. So for me, what I've realized is that if I don't sleep enough, if I eat lots of sugary foods, if I drink too much, or to the point where even if I drink at the moment, so I've just stopped drinking for now, if I'm not living my values, if I'm overworking or overthinking. And then there's also some other triggers, like regular thoughts that I have, like the property market collapsing, or like negative energy, or like different things like that are stories that I've told myself that create a fear response, which elevates my heart rate, which makes my breathing shallower, and all of those other things that end up, me fusing onto a thought or an idea, and instead of it just being like a cloud that passes in the sky, I hook onto it, and then all of a sudden, you've ever had that day where you're like, holy shit, how did I get here? You know what I mean? Like, how did I go from, that person bips their horn at me, to getting angry about that person, to thinking about something that happened to you while you're a kid, to thinking about that thing that happened to you while you're at school. It's just like, what the hell? It's just someone bit their horn at me. I can't control that person. Like, that's their thing, whatever. Like, and just letting the thought pass. So that's a lot of the work that I've been doing. And so from this book and from working with the psychologist, I then, started to go away for these weekends in the caravan with my family, which really started to help. And we started to work on like lots of different unhealthy thinking styles that a lot of us have, particularly investors. A lot of investors, like an unhealthy thinking style for a lot of people with anxiety, or investors or business people or mums and dads, is kind of like, thinking very black or white, or thinking very linear, or like catastrophizing something, or having some sort of massive bias there that enables you to not see things clearly. Like, there's just all sorts of different ways that you can think, and that those unhealthy thinking styles can really sort of impact that long-term health and mental health. So from there, I really started getting into, through my wife, Oprah's Super Soul podcast, and that was kind of like the next stage in the journey for me, where I listened to that 10-part or 10 episodes that Oprah does with Eckhart, Tolle, and that was just life-changing, because it was so different to what I'm used to listening to. Like, after just listening to property stuff, just reading, just watching property stuff for literally 10 years straight, almost at the expense of everything else. As weird as that is to sound, like, I just, I know that to get very, very, very good at something, you've got to be very, very focused at something. And so, like, it's been really refreshing to listen to something different. And Eckhart went on from what I was already learning to start looking at ego, and to start looking at living your purpose and finding your purpose, and to working with your mind, and living in the present moment, and being connected to people. Also recognizing that life is finite, and that life is so beautiful, and that you don't have to be chasing goals to be happy, that you don't have to be living in the past or the future, and you don't have to let your mind run your life. You can, to begin to create a bit of an observing self, so that you've got a buffer between your thoughts and yourself, and you can observe them, which is kind of all the same work that I was doing with the psychologist and through the happiness trap. But that was very, very powerful for me, and I still go back to those podcasts quite regularly just to listen to them. One thing that I've learned about anxiety for me is that sometimes it feels like it's not there at all and it's like completely gone. And so because of that, it's kind of like sometimes you're feeling really, really healthy, and so you're like, well, I don't have to do any exercise, or I don't have to eat well for a while. Then all of a sudden you feel like shit again, and it's kind of been the same with anxiety. So, it's kind of come in these waves over the last couple of years, and what I'm learning to do much better is on a daily basis take much better care of myself. So this morning, for example, I set my alarm at 6 o'clock. I got up. Well, I did some breathing in bed for a little bit because I was super tired and I wanted to fall back to sleep. But I did 10 minutes of breathing in bed. Just simple, like slow breaths in through the belly, 4 count, hold for 2, 4 count, out, hold for 2. Like just, simple breathing stuff, but always through the stomach as opposed to the chest, because I find shallow breathing can sort of spur on anxiety or a bit of a fight response type thing, a bit of cortisol sometimes for me. And then I got up and I did a 25 or 20 minute yoga session on hip mobility, and then I did a 5-minute yoga session on back mobility. And then by that point my girls were up, and one of them's like, Dad, can we go down to the beach, which is just walk a distance from my house down the road. So I was like, hell yeah. It was a beautiful morning this morning, as you can sort of see out the window, and we walked down there with the dog. The girls did some like balancing and stuff like that. I find like spending time with my kids is so good for my anxiety because they just keep me super present. And I had a jump in the ocean and a swim for a minute. It was completely one of those days where it was just like glass, just absolutely beautiful, no waves. And then we walked back. I held one of my daughter's hands all the way home, got home, had a shower, had a smoothie, and then just took the kids to school, telling stories all the way, and then recording this video. And so, that sort of sets me up for a better day. So something else that I've tried, because I've been just trialing so many different things for the last couple of years now to try and figure this out, because I'm not the sort of person that's going to live with anxiety until I'm 60 or 70. Like, I really want to figure it out and understand my mind better. So like the third stage of all of this is, Eckhart Tolle's kind of, and the Oprah podcast has got me into thinking about things a little bit differently. And so, I've been starting to learn for the first time in a long time again about health in a different way. Yeah, so that sort of triggered for me like just an interest in some different sorts of thinking again. So I've been listening to the Oprah Super Soul podcast, where she interviews incredible people, from religious leaders and spiritual people through to the most amazing scientists in the world, and incredible people, and talks about very, very different things. I've been reading a bit about Stoicism and Zen Buddhism, as well as some of the Japanese philosophies, as well as some of the Chinese like Tao stuff, and it's just beginning to think about and understand things again in a different way, just for interest, more from a health perspective, like a physical health perspective, around living longer and living with purpose and living happier. But it's just all part of a journey, I suppose. And that's what I've realized with mental health. It's some days you wake up feeling really good, and other days you don't as much, and sometimes you can get triggered by things, and it's nice to have people that you can speak to about it. Like my wife's really good with that, and I've got some good people like my dad and some friends in my life that I can speak to it, and a lot of clients that we work with as well, like being like, hey man, like I really appreciate you sharing that stuff, because a lot of people in the property industry particularly are just sort of like big masks on and stuff like that, and it's kind of nice to have a conversation that's actually real about what's really going on in someone's life. And another thing that's been very, very helpful for me is that I've really found like deep gratitude for my position in my life right now. Like I've just I'm so grateful for my family and my friends and the people that I care about. I'm so grateful that I get to do business every day and that I love. Like, I'm so grateful that I'm working towards financial freedom and that I found this stuff out when I was a bit younger. You know, I'm so grateful for the fortunate things that have happened to me and the hard work that I've done. I'm so grateful that I've got a good savings habit and a good plan for my financial future. Like, all of those things make me feel good. And so, you know, I think if you're out there and you're slowly working through this stuff, I highly recommend that book, The Happiness Trap. I highly recommend going and getting some help. Like, it was hard on my ego because I'm like, I'm a strong person, I'm a resilient person, like, I'll figure this out, and I couldn't figure it out on my own in this short period of time that I've been able to, with some objective third-party help. And it wasn't that they were judging me, it was just that they gave me some tools to work through this stuff. And I've come out the other side now, and I'm such a different person in such a better way, such a stronger person. I live my values so much more. I think I've become more empathetic and more caring and a better communicator. I understand that everyone goes through their own stuff, and you know, I wish you all the best in your journey. Like, it's a tricky one, mental health, and I wish I could say there was just an easy silver bullet for it, but all I can say is it's worth doing the work because you'll come out stronger. And, you know, so one thing that I've decided to do now, which is making me feel great, is I've decided, because I'm lucky enough to do that, to drop the kids at school at 8:30 in the morning, and then leave the office every day but Thursday at 3:30 in the afternoon. And those shorter days, and living a bit more of a balanced life, you know, because what I was very good at, and what a lot of people that are suffering with mental health are really good at, is reducing everything down and blocking everything into, this is the work me, this is the exercise family me, this is the whatever me. And what I've realized is that it's all just life. And so, you know, I'm working 5 days a week now instead of 4, which I did for a year and a half, but I'm feeling a lot more balanced every day. I'm not rushing around like crazy at work, still producing the same amount of output or even more because I've got more time to do it, but I'm getting to spend time training and looking after my family and, you know, switching between states better and stuff like that. So, you know, I know this is a bit different for what we do, but mental health is super important, and I truly wish that people could work through this stuff in the way that, you know, I have, which is head on as opposed to avoiding it. Because what I realise as someone that avoided it for so long is that it does catch up with you over time, and it's also something that's not permanent or not fixed. Like, you know, I don't even know if I necessarily have anxiety anymore. I think I just have stress sometimes come up in my life, but I've just got all of these tools or all of this scaffolding. So instead of the drop when I used to fall from there to there, you know, I've put this scaffolding in place, so if I do fall, it's just to there. And then if I do fall from there, it's just to there, and I know how to pull myself back together really, really quickly. So I wish you all the best. I know this is a different one, and I'm certainly not a psychologist. I don't know what I'm talking about with this stuff, but I've just done things that have worked for me. And, you know, if you're struggling with stuff, I really do hope you can go and find some support, because there's some incredible people out there. Like, go talk to a couple of different GPs and get a few different referrals, and just, like anything in life, trial a bunch of different people until you find what's right for you. But that happiness trap's amazing. If you're struggling with anxiety right now in a big way, jump off this, you know, thing and take a listen to, there's this incredible little 2.5 minute video on YouTube called The Struggle Switch. If you're really dealing with anxiety right now, just Google The Struggle Switch and watch it, because it kind of perfectly sums up the way that I was feeling when I had major anxiety. And just even understanding it, that, you know, 400 other thousand people or whatever have watched that video, that you're not on your own, and that, you know, you can still be successful, you can still be a great dad or a great mum, you can still run businesses productively, you can still help people, you can still look after your health and work through this stuff, as opposed to just having this overwhelming feeling or heavy feeling or sticky, dark feeling all the time surrounding you, which is not who you are. It's not who you're supposed to be either. So I wish you all the best. You know, sorry for speaking a bit out of school, but I think life's too short to not share this stuff with you. And I love where you're at, and it's all part of our journey, and just keep working through it. See ya.